Hi there and welcome to the Student Learning Support Services English Language Support Program. My name is Lauren and today we are talking about tenses and their aspects. Now, tenses are one of the things that students of English as a second or third or fourth language find quite difficult and complex. And they kind of are. I'm sure you know though that English has three tenses: the past, the present, and the future. And within these three tenses, there are four aspects: the simple aspect, the continuous aspect, the perfect simple, and the perfect continuous. Now, I am going to run through each of these briefly, but be aware that this is a lot of information in a very short amount of time. And I'm really just touching on the most important aspects of each of these. This is something that you will need to practice at. And importantly, there are activities and a quiz linked to this, so make sure you check those out to practice how we actually apply tenses in practice, because of course what it looks like on the page is often more complex and difficult to figure out than me standing here just telling you how in theory we use each of these tenses. Okay. So let's go. Now, you might have previously studied tenses sort of this way, looking first at the past and its different aspects. The simple past, I did my homework. The continuous past, I was doing my homework. The perfect simple past, I had done my homework. And the very tricky perfect continuous past, I had been doing my homework. And then you probably did the same for the present and the future and looked at them in sort of this structure of past, present, future. What I'm going to do in this video is actually look at them this way. We're going to look at each aspect, because when it comes to the application of tenses, it's useful to think about what the tenses and the aspects actually mean, how they function in our writing, because this is not a beginner tenses video, okay? This is not as concerned with how we form these tenses. It's much more concerned with how we apply them and some tricks for remembering which tense is most appropriate in which context. And so that's why we're going to look at them this way. We're going to think about what each of these aspects mean. What does the simple aspect distill down to? Well, simply it expresses a fact, something that is true, something that is complete or is a habit. The perfect aspect, meanwhile, expresses a complete action. I have eaten dinner. The continuous aspect expresses an ongoing action, and the perfect continuous action expresses the end of an ongoing action or a completed ongoing action. Now, obviously, each of these is a little bit more complex than this, which is why we're going to break them down according to each tense. But I want you to keep this basic grid in mind, because at the end of the day, if you're really struggling to figure out which tense you need to use, this can be a very useful starting point. So that means we're going to start with the simple aspect, that which expresses a fact or something that is true. So the simple aspect, which is also called the indefinite, is used to express facts, complete actions, and habits. However, the tense itself doesn't necessarily make it clear whether the action that is being described is either complete or habitual. For example, we climbed Mount Lofty yesterday. This is the past simple aspect. The context here, having the word yesterday as a part of this, does tell us that this action is complete. By contrast, I could say, Mount Lofty is the highest mountain in Adelaide, and this is a fact. It is something that is true. I could also say, we will climb Mount Lofty on Sunday. These are all true. These are all also completed, or in this case, will be a completed action. If I was to have a habit, I might say we climb Mount Lofty every week, or we will climb Mount Lofty on Sunday. So that's setting up a habit. So when we talk about the simple past tense, we really are talking about an action that was completed in the past, something specific. Can you picture it as being finished and done in your mind. So for example, he went to the cinema. The survey revealed a discrepancy. And this is formed quite simply with the base form of the verb plus ed in the case of regular verbs such as they jumped, she asked. But we do have a lot of irregular verbs when we're talking about the simple past tense. And unfortunately, these are verbs you just sort of have to learn and become more familiar with. For example, he put, she built, he won. There are some patterns to these, but they vary quite a lot. So, sorry. Then we have the simple present, and this describes facts and habits. So I love chocolate, or I drive to work every day. Both of these things are true. We can also think of this as something that we might say in a general sense. You know, men are generally taller than women. That is a generality. I'm not necessarily talking about any specific man, but it is a kind of statement of fact. Of course, there are exceptions, but it is a general statement. It is also used to describe scheduled events, which is a little bit confusing because this can be easily confused with the future tense. But if it is scheduled, if you know that it is going to happen, think of it like a fact or a habit. It will happen at a specific time, so we can say the plane arrives at 7 o'clock. The train departs at 5. Class finishes at 3. We also use this when we're telling a joke or when we're telling a story that we want to engage our reader in, get that sense of sort of something very direct and immediate happening. You might hear jokes framed this way, like a man walks into a bar, or I say to the barman. It's really just a way of engaging a listener when we're speaking specifically. And this is formed with the base form of the verb plus s or es, depending on whether it ends in a vowel or a consonant. So we jump, doesn't need an s. She jumps, she goes. So the simple future describes an event that will occur in the future, and this is a specific and definite event that will occur in the future. I will go to the shops this afternoon. This essay will discuss falls prevention, and it's formed with the word will plus the base form of the verb. So he will jump, they will go. Pretty easy. So this brings us to talking about the perfect aspect, which expresses a complete action. So a completed action that occurs at an indefinite time in the past, present, or future, a time that we are not specifying to our reader, whether that be because we don't know when it happened, we've forgotten when it happened, or because when it happened is not important. So the train had left by the time we arrived. I don't know what time it had left though. Or I have eaten here before, I say maybe as I enter a restaurant and remember having eaten here before. Or by week 10, we will have finished this module. And so because this tense doesn't really have the specific time, we shouldn't use it when we do want to be definite about when something happened, when we do have a very particular action taking place at a very particular point in time. Okay, so the past perfect, also known as the pluperfect, is used to describe an action completed, usually before another event or action in the past. And so in this way, it's very useful when we're describing a sequence of events, such as I had spoken to him about the problem before we met. So the action of speaking to somebody has taken place before the meeting. That is a completed action. I started and ended speaking to this person before we met. Or if I had left earlier, I wouldn't have missed the bus. So one action is complete, having taken place in this case before another action which is also complete. And it is formed with the word had plus the past participle. So John had started the music before we arrived. The present perfect is used to describe an event or action that began in the past and continued into the present. It's something that's very recent or something that still continues to have consequences in the present. So we have been in class since 10 a.m. So class started at 10. We are still in class. It hasn't finished yet. Or we have met before. So we met in the past, but the consequences of our meeting are still true because I still know who you are, or I remember you. So we don't need to meet again. And it's formed with the word has or have, depending on who the subject of the sentence is. He or she has, we have, plus the past participle. So we have started studying, or she has begun the module. The future perfect, meanwhile, is used to describe an event that will be completed before another action or event in the future. This is where things start to get a little bit confusing, but let's have a look. So, I will have eaten before the meeting. Or, I hope that before I die, I will have made an impact on the world. So in both of these cases, again, we've got that relationship between two events. One event is happening before the other. It's just that in this case, both of those events are happening in the future. But still, even though they're both in the future, one comes first and is complete before the other one that follows. Okay, so I will have eaten. I am going to have food in my stomach. I will have finished eating before we have our meeting. And it's formed by using the words will have plus the past participle. We will have decorated before the party starts. So that's the perfect aspect. Let's now talk about the continuous aspect. Now, continuous is about expressing an ongoing action. So if both the simple and the perfect aspects in all three tenses are about completed actions, defined and specific actions that you can imagine taking place sort of at once, the continuous is a little bit different. It's something that has duration, something that is ongoing or in progress. So let's have a look at this a little bit more deeply. Okay, so the continuous aspect is used to express, as I said, an ongoing action. It focuses on the duration of the event, something in progress at a specific period of time or over a period of time. We also use it to describe things that are new, temporary, or changing. So again, if you think about this in that sense of it being continuous, ongoing, the temporariness, it's not something that's specific and defined and definite. It's something that's fluid, changing, in flux, in progress. For example, we were watching television when you called. So again, here we have two actions, just like we had before with the perfect. But in this case, the action of watching television was ongoing. I want to emphasize to whoever I'm speaking to that action was in progress. It took place over a period of time that was interrupted by that phone call. Or we are renting an apartment in the city. So I might use the continuous aspect to describe something like this because this might be temporary. Perhaps I don't expect to stay in this apartment for very long. Or in the future, I will be going to the show later. So that process of going is something that will be taking place over a period of time. So the continuous past describes an ongoing activity, as I said before, in the past. So we were arguing about the film, and usually this happens before another activity. I was talking to my boss when the phone rang, or while the instructor was speaking, I took notes. And so for this reason, we often get a mix of these tenses, right? I was talking to my boss in the continuous aspect when the phone rang in the simple aspect. One ongoing action in the past interrupted by a specific, definite and completed action also in the past. And so this is formed by using the verb to be in its past version, was or were, plus the present participle, which is the ing on the end of the verb. We were writing, I was studying. The continuous present tense is used to describe an ongoing action in the present. So she is reading about chemical engineering. She is in the process of reading. If you walk into her room right now, you will find her in the process of reading. It can also be used to describe a planned activity that will happen in the future. So again, something that is scheduled or definite. We are going to England next year, or the train is arriving in a few minutes. And we form the continuous present by using the verbs to be again in their present tense form, is or are, with the present participle. So she is eating, or you are walking. Now the continuous future describes an action, an ongoing action that will happen in the future for an expected length of time. Remember, the continuous is all about that duration, something in progress, something that is not necessarily complete. So the film will be showing at the cinema for 3 weeks, or I can't come to your party because I will be competing in a football tournament. So remember, the process or the relationship between the two actions in time is what is really important here. It's about showing how these two things are connected to each other, or really emphasizing that duration. If we look at this last example, if I was to just say I will be competing in a football tournament, yes, I can say that, but it makes more sense that I would use the continuous when I have this first part. I can't come to your party because I will be competing, as in at the same time that takes place, I will be in process of doing something else. If I don't have that relationship, I could have just said, I will compete in a football tournament on Tuesday. And so having that comparison here, that what will I be doing at the same time as something else, that's what's sort of important in the continuous future sometimes. And so we form this with the verb to be again in the future set, so will be plus the present participle. She will be coming. They will be going. So that's our continuous tense. Now let's look at the last aspect, the perfect continuous. This is the really tricky one because this is where we bring together the complete action with the ongoing action. So let's talk about this in more depth. Okay, so as I said, the perfect continuous is tricky, and that's because it is bringing together those two elements, the perfect, which suggests that an action is complete, and the continuous, which tells us that action is ongoing. So we use it to describe a completed event that has been ongoing, or an ongoing event that took place over a very specific point in time. And it is confusing to think of something being both in progress and complete at the same time. It sort of sits between them. It's really about the point of view from when we're speaking, and it's also quite context specific. So she had been out dancing the night before. This is different to say she had danced the night before, the perfect, which doesn't emphasize the duration of her dancing, that process of dancing. And it's also different from she was dancing the night before, the just plain continuous, which doesn't suggest an end to that action. So where she was dancing when what happened, we'd kind of expect if we were just to use the continuous there. Instead, she had been out dancing the night before. Took place over a period of time, but it's also finished. I have been reading all day. Again, this is different to just I have read all day or I am reading all day, isn't it? And here it relies on when I'm speaking from to make sense. If I started reading in the past and I continue to read up until the point of speaking. The action is maybe still ongoing, I might still be in the process of reading, but this still suggests that it's a complete action that started in the past and has continued up until the present. And then we have the future. By the time I graduate, I will have been studying for 4 years. Now I know this one is super tricky because it suggests the end of a future action that has taken place over a period of time. So we're thinking about, again, when am I speaking from? I'm speaking from the present, thinking forward to the future, at which point I will be looking back over time. Okay, we're going to go into it some more, don't worry. Okay, first, the past continuous. And this, as I said, describes an event that began, was ongoing, and ended in the past. So I had been working there for 5 years when I quit, or we had been dating for 3 years. In this example, it suggests that we are no longer dating. We were dating for that duration of time, but our relationship, very sadly, has ended. And it's formed with had been plus the present participle. I had been riding my bike. So the present perfect continuous describes an event that started in the past and is continuing into the present. So the perfect continuous doesn't necessarily tell us a finished, complete action in the same way that the past does. But that action is complete in the sense that it has a definite beginning point and continues up until the point when we are speaking. So I have been studying all day. I started this morning, I'm still studying now that I'm speaking to you. Or I have been waiting for the plumber since 10 a.m. I am still waiting, but I really want to emphasize that duration of time. It's more than just I am waiting for the plumber. I have been waiting. I'm emphasizing the past here. Maybe I'm super frustrated, so I'm emphasizing that I have been doing this in the past and I'm still doing it now. And it's formed with has or have plus been and the present participle. I have been dancing for 2 years. And finally, we get the future perfect continuous, which describes an ongoing action that will continue up until a point in the future. As I said before, this one's quite difficult. So by the time our order arrives, we will have been waiting an hour. Or in July, he will have been playing football for 30 years. So again, thinking from my present point in time forward to the future, from which point I'm looking backwards at something that has taken a long time. And it's formed with the verbs will have been, plus the present participle. She will have been studying for 3 years when she graduates. I know that's tricky. I hope all of this has made some sense to you. Remember to come back to this chart, this very quick table that can be a little bit of a cheat sheet if you need it. And I hope that thinking about them in that way of, is this a true fact or a complete definite action or a habit? We're using the simple. Is this something that is ongoing, in progress? We're using the continuous. Is this something that is complete, but at an undefinite perspective of time? We're using the perfect. And is it both indefinite and complete and ongoing? Well, then we're using the perfect continuous. That's it for this